This is Josh with Homesteading Family, and welcome to this week's episode of the Pantry Chat, Food for Thought. And today we're going to be talking about buying homestead property. I've got Annette Sievert, I hope I'm saying her name correctly, joining me today, who has written a book literally called How to Buy Homestead Property. And that's a subject that's near and dear to my heart, and I know for a lot of you out there, it is for yours as well, as you're on this homesteading journey and maybe thinking about making the leap for the first time, or maybe thinking about stepping up or stepping sideways. And, it's a big subject because you're spending a lot of your resources, your hard-earned cash, as it were, to make an investment, and you want to make the right investment. So hopefully the knowledge that Annette is going to share in the conversation we have today will be helpful to you guys. But first, as always, we need to give a shout out to our sponsors. They help to make this possible and be able to get you this information and this show. So today I want to give a shout out and a thanks to Lehmans for helping bring this information to the world. Lehmans has been around for a long, long time. Carolyn and I have been shopping with Lehmans for, well over a decade. I'd guess closer to 15 years or so. And they have a lot of wonderful products that help homesteaders out, from canning supplies to milling your own grain supplies to tools to, wood burning stoves to many, many things that are very, very appropriate for the homesteader. And especially if you're looking for tools to have for, say, off grid. Now, I'm a proponent that when you've got electricity, you got power, which they have those kind of tools too, butter churns, lots of good stuff. Use it. That's what makes the homesteading life work in the modern world on a daily basis. But systems fail us. The grid goes down, things happen, and knowing how to say, and have the tools to say, churn butter by hand or cut wood by hand, or all the many different things you can do, make bread. All right. Lots of different things that we want to have those tools and skills. And Lehmans is a place where you can get a lot of those things. They've also got a blog with a lot of helpful tips and tricks to help you take the next steps. So head on over to lehmans.com. That's LEHMANS.com. You're going to be surprised what they have. And again, thank you, Lehmans, for helping bring this pantry chat to the world today. All right, let's see a little bit about my guest, Annette. Annette and her husband live on a 30-acre homestead in eastern Tennessee with 3 dogs, livestock, an orchard, a garden. And Annette has been in real estate as well for over 43 years in 2 different countries and 3 different states. So she's well versed in land ownership and transactions. Now, land ownership can be a journey. It is a journey that can be difficult to navigate at times. And it comes with its fair share of unexpected obstacles and hoops to jump through. Throughout her 40 years of real estate experience, Annette has seen it all and knows exactly what to look for in a property. All of this experience and know-how is how all of her experience, and know-how is yours with her property guide, her book, How to Buy a Homestead Property. So let's welcome Annette here today. Howdy, how are you?
Oh, doing well, thank you. How is life in Idaho?
Oh, life in Idaho is good. We've been through cold, we've been through a lot of snow, and now it looks like it's going to rain, which is a little unseasonable and a little early yet. We're always excited for spring, but we've got 1.5 feet of snow, and they're supposed to get 2 inches of rain. That makes a mess.
Yes, no, we had 2 cold spells, and the second one brought, I think, 2 inches of snow, which in this area is sort of everything slows down. So
2 inches of snow kind of grinds things to a halt. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. And so you're in Tennessee, right?
Yes. So we are in Tennessee has West, Middle, and East Tennessee. We are in East Tennessee, so on the eastern side of the Cumberland Plateau. And we are about 30 to 40 minutes away from Knoxville, 20 minutes from Maryville. Mm-hmm. And our hamlet is Greenback, but that is really just a zip code.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I've spent a little time over close to that country. We lived for a short spell up on the Cumberland Plateau. outside of Monterey, and beautiful country.
Yes,
Yeah.
very much. And you know what that does to the weather, right? So the Cumberland Plateau sort of runs into the energy of these storms that come up from the southwest. So when you're on the western side, you have more tornadoes, more serious weather, and on our side, it's calmer.
It's what?
It is calmer. Sorry, my accent. Calmer, Calmer.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. It is. We always felt like we were stuck between that air coming up from the south and from the north, and like it would go from warm to cold and icy, and did a lot of interesting things up there on the plateau. But it was great gardening. It was great for gardening. It was great for grass and livestock. Yeah, we did a lot of great things there in our homesteading journey. And but you yourself are a homesteader, and tell us a little bit about what you have going on there. Sorry, I got a sneeze in there trying to come out. Tell us about your homestead and your journey a little bit into, like, why are you even homesteading?
So we immigrated from Germany in 2000, my husband and I, and had 2 babies. And we bought the first property we bought in the US had 2 acres of land with it. And so we started basically there already with just showing the kids how it is to grow your own berries and stuff like. So it grew from there. And when we moved to Oregon, we bought a 3-acre property. We had pigs, goats, chickens. We had a sincere garden, a goods garden, lots of fruit trees. And so it grew from there. And then when we decided to make a change, we moved here and we bought a 30-acre property. And the main objective was to grow our own meat. We really wanted to do that. And so we bought a Dexter herd, and the herd is a bull and 2 mama cows, and there by now 4 calves. And the first one will go to the freezer in about 2 weeks. And then we have Berkshire sows, and we have chickens for the eggs, and the occasional beef stock, chicken stock, and large garden, and an orchard. Yeah. And it's been great.
Are you dairying with the cows or just beef?
No, just beef for now. We could theoretically, because Dexters are sort of dual purpose, but there's just so much that you can do. It's just my husband and I, and we had to do a lot of infrastructure. He built a barn all by himself, really great. And so the barn is done now, and a lot of infrastructure that needed to go in, and it just takes a while. You know how that is.
Yep, it does. It takes time.
Oh yeah.
And that's something that people have to realize is to get a homestead up and running, it not only does it take shopping and finding the right place, but it takes time to get systems up in place. And that's a little bit of work and a little bit of patience.
Yes. Well, the patience. Yeah. Fortunately, my husband is very, very handy. And despite being a physician, he really can build things very well. That helps a lot.
Good. Yep.
So
before we get into buying a property, though, what's your why? Why are you? I mean, I know that can be a long tail question, but just what's your why? Why are you out there on the land raising meat, gardening, orcharding, doing all the things you're doing?
So the longer the older we get, the less we want to be dependent on things. That was really the big part of it when we moved to this part of the area, and we wanted to be as independent as possible. And back in Oregon, we had 3 acres and then 10-acre properties around us. So we didn't have exactly close neighbors, but for us, the longer we were around, the less we liked it less and less. We really wanted to be as far away from other people as possible.
Okay.
And that was really a big motivation factor for this. So the way we're situated now, we do not have neighbors. There's nobody around. That was one thing. And the other thing is that we wanted to be as independent as possible, independent from any food supply. So the goal is really to feed ourselves, let's say 80-90% of what we use. That's the big motivation. And the other motivation really is to leave something for our children that is different from just a house. Yeah. This is purpose, right? This is purpose. And I am hoping that one day, which is their decision, they might just come and take it over. They're here actually pretty frequently.
Oh, good. Well, I love the generational vision part of that. That's something that Carolyn and I think a lot about of, and that we're doing, hoping to do with our family, right? That's their choice in the end, but hoping to pass the land on, the lifestyle on, um, and um, and just create some deeper, longer roots.
Yes, and that's the big part. I'm really happy when I see our son posting something and it is the family farm. I just love that. It's
Yeah.
nice. Yeah.
Yeah.
So they get that bug and they're here often and help out. And actually, our oldest son is here right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good. Well, so besides being a homesteader here, you've been in real estate for a long, long time. Sounds like probably most of your life, in different countries. I assume Germany and then here, and so you've seen a lot. And you wrote a book. Why did you write the book, How to Buy a Homestead Property?
When we started to look for property here, not so Oregon, we knew what we wanted, and it was relatively easy to obtain. But once we started to look here, there were so many more factors, and I realized after a while that I really know how to do this, and I also know what to look out for, what to avoid. And then I had clients here who wanted to do the same, and there were a lot of questions that I could just really easily answer. At one point I said, there must be a book about this, and then I just looked it up. There was none.
Yeah.
There are a few books about how to buy land or how to buy farmland or something like that, but that's just really a niche. And the big picture of how to tackle this, what to avoid, what to look for, which items to define for yourself, so that you know what you really want. That's really what motivated me to do this. And then I just sat down and wrote it.
Well, I think that's awesome, and it's in my experience, and I've got a lot of background in real estate management, construction, property management, design. I'm a certified permaculturalist, and so I've had a lot of conversations besides buying our own properties over the years, and I've seen, especially in the last 5 years, a lot of realtors, that claim to be knowledgeable about homesteading property, but they're not really homesteaders. They're not really living the life. And so while they've got plenty of valid knowledge in a lot of ways, I don't know that they necessarily understand the homesteader and what they really need. So I think you're the right person with your combination of real estate experience and actually living the life to help other people think through what is, one of the bigger decisions in their life as far as a financial decision. So um, let's talk about someone who thinks they're ready to buy a homestead property. What are things that they need to consider?
So if I start with what most people are looking for that are contacting me, and that is basically, I mean, East Tennessee is a big hub for this. People usually want to have 10 acres. For some reason, that's sort of the
10.
thing. 10 acres. I would say that
Interesting.
80% of people want 10 acres. They have no clue what 10 acres are. Most of them
Uh-huh.
really don't understand that. Then there's the other side where they say, oh, I want a huge piece of property. I want 100 acres. They also have no clue what that is. Yeah, so it's the a total minority really understands that. How much is 10 acres, right? What do you have to do in order to work on that? What do you need in infrastructure? What are you looking for in location? All these things come into play. And people who say, I want a big piece of property, like those 100 acres, they also do not understand what it means to work on that property, to secure it, to fence it, to defend it if needed. All these items they really don't have a grip on. And the first thing that I usually do is I just go to a piece of property with them and show them, so this is 10 acres. And I would say in the absolute majority of the cases, they say, oops, because it really is 10 acres is a lot of land for people who are coming from the city. And then it usually shrinks. Right? That's what it is.
Yeah. So I guess, are you seeing people, as a question, are you seeing people, they kind of get an idea in their head that has less to do with knowing about like how that land's going to help them accomplish their goals and more just like, 100 acres is a nice, big, giant, round number. It gives me a lot of elbow room. 10 acres doesn't seem very big as a number, but like, as you said, and that bears out in my experience. And so it seems like people need to get an idea what they want to do to determine how much acreage they would like.
Yes, so it's size-wise, that's one thing. And then the other thing is what do they really want to do with this piece of property? And that, of course, depends on where they ultimately land. And I think I referenced in the book, there's Joel, not Joel Salatin, that's one of them. No, I'm blanking. I'll come back to it. But
Joel wrote the foreword for the book. So everybody out there, Joel wrote the foreword for Annette's book, which is wonderful.
No, it's the God, why don't I have that right now? But I'll be back to it. The point is that you have to define where in the United States you actually want to be. So there's the criteria of location, like you want to be close to mountains for skiing, for whatever. You want to be on the water. You want to be in a valley. You want to be in a hillside. You want to have rolling hills. You want to be close to your church, to your mosque, to your temple, whatever it is. You want to have good schools if your kids still go to public school. You want to have community. All these things need to be defined. And once you're defining them for you, then you really understand where in the US you actually will land. So that narrows it down. Strategic Relocation is the book, Joel Skousen.
Oh, yeah. That's an excellent book. I haven't looked at that in a while, but you're right. Strategic Location. Yes.
That's great, right?
Yeah.
That really narrows it down for you. And once you understand what all those criteria are, you narrow down where in the US you actually want to be. And there's a lot of other, and Skousen does that really well. So he has all kinds of criteria. So once you've defined that, so now the next step is you are in East Tennessee. How close to things do you want to be? And the majority of people want to be 30 minutes away from things. What does that do for you, right? 30 minutes cover a lot of ground if you're in the country, cover not a lot of ground when you're in suburban or urban area, simply because of the traffic. Mm-hmm. And so you want to be in a radius around, for some reason, always Home Depot. I want to be 30 minutes from the nearest Home Depot. I hear that a lot, right? And so Costco. That gives you Costco. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but that's in here. That narrows it down to a certain area. Mm-hmm. And then I hear from people, they say, okay, I can drive an hour. But the reality of driving an hour is you're far out. You need to understand what that means in the weather. So you're coming from California where it doesn't snow, and you're moving to here and you're an hour out. And now really everything comes to a stop and you can't go anywhere. So it's all these definitions that you have to make for yourself and to understand what those decisions really mean at the end. And can you live with those? So what I mainly do is define what people actually really want and what makes them happy. Yeah. And that might be very different from what they're starting with.
Well, or what they're imagining, you may, like, I think you bring out a very good point. You may be willing to drive an hour, but what happens when, you've got really bad weather? What are different things when you're out in the country that affect that? You don't have the roads maintained the way you're maybe used to in a more populated area or an area without weather. And so your access to those resources is really, really important, because it takes time, and it rearranges your day and your life at times.
Yeah. And it's also when people come from mostly suburban areas, the majority of people really think about, coming from a city, suburban, and now they want to homestead. And they have not quite grasped yet what that means for yourself. Can you live with yourself in the true sense of the meaning? Can you be alone? Mm-hmm. Or do you need party? Do you need opera? Do you need good shopping? Do you want to go to a restaurant once in a while, to a decent restaurant? If you really need that and want that, that narrows it further down where you can be. And if people really think that they can be an hour away and really drive for quite a while to get to shopping, that's the reality always hits them at one point.
Yeah. So I think to summarize, one of the things you're saying is think twice about going too big or too far. Really think
Yes,
about those two things. And the interesting thing is both of those are going to use more of your resources, right? And when you get
they
to
do. Yes.
living the homesteading life, you realize how important every resource you have is, whether it's your time, your money, the wear on your vehicles and equipment. And so I think that's a good thought, being careful about going too big and too far out.
Yes, that summarizes it. Yes.
What are some other considerations for access? Access to property, both legally and functionally, can bring a lot of surprises for people moving from suburbia.
Yes. So there's all kinds of stuff that you need to think about. But let's just start with easements, for instance. If you are buying a property that doesn't have direct access from the street, from a public street, so you have to go over somebody's property to get there.
Mm-hmm.
See that a lot here. That easement being on somebody else's land has a lot of conflict potential, of course. Trees come down, the other land is being inherited by somebody. It's all kinds of stuff. So I would always go for property that has direct access from the road. That said, could be that you have to cross over a creek or some kind of body of water or just a swamp. So you need a bridge. And how much is that bridge? And what kind of bridge do you really need? Do you need just a culvert and some railroad ties? Or do you need an engineered bridge because you want to build a large house in the back and now all those construction vehicles have to cross over? Yeah. And that, of course, is liability. So you have to know how much your bridge will have to carry. And then there's access via going over railroad tracks or any kind of public utility that you have to cross over from. So there's a lot there that you need to understand what the access would be. And then, of course, very simply, what is the road like that you're on? Is that public? Is that private? Is that within a road that is owned by everybody around you? Who is maintaining it? How much is that cost? Will that cost you? How often is it built? Is there a road maintenance agreement in place, or is this something that is just a handshake agreement? All of these things you need to find out.
Yeah, and I think people need to think about maintenance as well. The bigger the property and the further out you are, the more maintenance you're going to have to do. And then depending on weather and geographical features, that can affect the maintenance as well, right? And that has its own cost and time sink to it.
Yes, and then they have the question is what the property actually is. Is it wooded? Is it wide open? People don't think about what it means. If you're on a hillside and everything is wooded, what do you do with this? Now you have to take all the trees out in order to make a home site, make some pasture and garden area. You have to clear that. And even if you have a timber cruise, which means that you can actually sell the trees, the timber companies actually take the logs, but they don't take out the stumps. Mm-hmm. And that is a major cost. Yeah. Right? You have to get heavy equipment in. Is that heavy equipment available where you are? Can you get into your hillside with that heavy equipment? How much will that cost you? What do you do with the stumps? Do you have to bury them? Right? And that can create a sinkhole. There's all kinds of things that every decision has a follow-up decision to make. And I usually tell people wait a year especially for the big trees, to fell them, because nature took 100 years to grow it. You fell it within a few hours, but you don't know what you lost.
Yeah. Make sure you understand the decisions, the consequences of the decisions that you're making. Yeah. Yes. Well, and there's so much. I want to cover some other subjects, but I think you really highlight just the need to really think through not just where in the country you are, but the piece of property you're buying, and all the things that are going to affect you just living on that property, and the way the way your life is going to change or need to adapt, besides the resources that it's going to consume. What's your recommendation as far as using an agent, not using an agent, finding an agent?
So this is in general, and that sounds self-serving, but in this case I can say it because this book is nationwide and it's not just for me here.
Mm-hmm.
I think that a good agent is indispensable for this because most people do not know what they're getting themselves into. Now, of course, you have to find somebody who actually knows what they're doing. And finding the right questions, asking the right questions will quickly turn out whether that person is knowledgeable or not. And then there are Facebook groups pretty much everywhere about homesteading. So if you are looking for somebody, ask those people, did you buy with an agent? What did that work? Is that a good person? Is there somebody who's specializing in your area in this kind of property? Are they homesteading themselves? So as you said, there are a lot of people who say they are specializing in it, and then they go home to their HOA. That does not jive with each other. So you really want to have somebody who does it, right?
Yeah. So what are a few questions, specific questions that you would have people ask a prospective agent?
I would always ask how long they're in the business and everybody has to start somewhere. And I'm sorry for the rookies, but it's just a fact of life that experience is hard to replace. So you really want to have somebody who has done this a few years, preferably through one of those cycles where things went over the cliff. So they understand what it means to buy too high and then having something around your neck. So the negative experience is as important as the positive experience. And being through these cycles makes you understand what happens if you want to sell something that you bought too high. And people who started in this business in 2017, they really don't know that. It was always good, right? It was always great in real estate. But there were times before that weren't, right? Mm-hmm. So that's one thing. The other thing is I would really ask maybe just questions about how do you recognize that land is actually not toxic? You know, this is one of the big things that we have around. We have properties, and you probably read those stories where somebody bought even an organic farm. It was poisoned by biosludge. Have you heard about that?
Mm-hmm.
So biosludge is basically the remnants from sewer treatment plants.
Oh yeah,
and they sold those as fertilizer, and they are as toxic as can be. You know, there's all kinds of stuff in there. Yeah, and if a property has been fertilized with biosludge, that can be a catastrophe. People losing their shirt over this. There are a few very good examples where they can't sell their produce as organic anymore because they have this toxic stuff on their land, and there's nothing you can do about it. Once it's done, it's done. So, and then the same thing with buying land that has been agriculturally used, and you go over it and you look at these neat rows of crop, and everything under it is dead. You know, so if it has been used for GMO crops, has been used with a lot of pesticides and herbicides, etc., that land is very hard to recover. And if you want to get it all out, what I read was 50, 60 years until that land is healthy again. None of us has that time. And so the question is, how has this been used, and how heavily has it been sprayed or treated or whatever? And can you use it for your purposes? So if I want to buy property to actually have an organic farm and sell my produce, I can't do that if I know that my property has been poisoned.
Yeah, well, even if you don't want to sell your produce, you
want to eat it. Yes,
you may not want to eat that produce. Yeah. It definitely takes some time, and depends on the chemicals that are used. Some of those chemicals can be eradicated, and you know, through regenerative practices, you can bring that land back. But you gotta know what you're stepping into. And of course, if you're buying for a business model, that's a whole nother. If you're buying to farm or do business on, that's a whole nother set of considerations besides just, you know, homesteading for yourself.
Yes.
And
it's a very involved topic. You really need to understand what you're getting yourself into. And the other thing is that buying property that has a structure on it, like even if it's an old house, it usually has infrastructure with it, either a well or public water, septic. That infrastructure is very valuable, because if you don't know whether you drill here and there will be water, that's an enormous risk. Same with a septic. Does your land percolate? You don't know that necessarily. You can test, but if the only way to put a septic in, and that depends on which state it is, it's much easier here in Tennessee than it's back in Oregon or in New York. You have to invest. You can easily invest $10,000-$15,000, if not more, into a septic system. So you have to have that extra cash. Other than that, there's no house. You have to have a septic. And a well is the same thing. So one of the things when we bought our property was we have 3 septics and 2 wells here. That is, it depends on where you are, can easily be 6 figures just in infrastructure that you don't have to pay for.
Yeah.
So really important to see that.
Yeah, I really recommend people don't buy, there's people that want to go off grid and they want to do rain catchment, which is great if you're in the right area and you have enough rainfall. But if you're buying a property depending on a well and it doesn't have a well, I would think if it's the ideal property and you don't want to walk away from it, I'd bargain in. They do the drilling for the well. And make sure that you hit water before you commit to that. And then, you pay for it if you do. But now a lot of sellers aren't going to want to do that. But man, you got to be so careful about buying a piece of property and not knowing if you're going to be able to get water. And the same on the septic system, right? Is it going to be able to perk? Are you going to be, even if you're, are you going to be able to put a septic system, or what kind, and to what degree?
Yes. I mean, depending on where you are here, as I said, here things are much, much easier and less expensive. But back in Oregon, they make you either connect to the public sewer if it's somehow available, cost $30,000, $40,000, $50,000, or they can ask you to put a sand filter in, $35,000. I mean, it can totally ruin you. Yeah. It really is a problem. Yeah. So it's the infrastructure is a really important thing. And
so I just want to, as we're moving through this, highlight, bullet points of things we're talking about. Access, how important access is, understanding it both legally and functionally, and understanding your water, not getting into a situation where you don't really have water, or to get water, it's much more expensive than you thought it was going to be. You've got to deal with waste, right? With septic. So knowing, again, what's your land going to allow you to do? What are the costs to get there? To make that happen. Of course, power as well, right? If you're buying rural land, does it have power to the property line? There can be deceiving things in the description sometimes where it looks power to the property line, and then you find out, well, it was actually down an easement, and it's actually 1,000 feet, from your actual property line, because it's not the road, but yet you're in so far, and all of a sudden you've got a bill. So you got to think about that electrical service as well, right?
Yes. So, I mean, that usually, even if you're in rural areas, you do have at least access to power. Mm-hmm. It's relatively rare that there's nothing there, but you're totally right that if you are 1,000 feet off the road for whatever reason, and it's on the road, that will be a huge cost factor to bring it in. And nowadays, usually it needs to be buried.
Yeah.
So it's not going, which is better in my opinion anyhow, but still costs a lot of money, right? And then if you want to go solar or something like that, out of own experience, that costs a lot of money. I mean, costs a lot of money, right? Especially when you can have solar panels are not that expensive. What is expensive is the retention, the battery. Mm-hmm. So if you need to have a battery, other than that, this is senseless because you need to keep it somehow. Otherwise, you have a candle at night.
What have you seen with people going off grid with electricity, and how well does that work for people?
For most of them, it really doesn't work very well. You have to be very humble, self-sufficient, don't have a lot of expectations, because things can go really, really wrong. And there's usually it's a combination of things that people are trying to do, something like wind and a little bit of solar. If you have a property that has access to some kind of cascading water, that's amazing, because then you can do some hydroelectric. That actually works well. But the properties that really have that are relatively rare. And the problem is also you are building this little power station. Now you have to bring the power to the house.
Mm-hmm.
So that's all of these little things people usually forget about. You have to have the infrastructure. So if your cascading waterfall is half a mile away, how do you get the power over there? So you have to think it through. So in most cases, off the grid is actually pretty spendy, to be honest, to be clear. That's my experience.
It's
If it really works.
You have to take care of the system yourself. And I'm all for it, but I see people jump real quick to off grid, and then I watch them. They've got to not just the spend and the installing and all, but they've got to learn how to work with an off grid system. Then they're trying to raise gardens, often for the first time. Then they're trying to do animals, and you're trying to do all these things and you're off grid.
Yeah.
And so to me, it's like, let's get a good generator. Let's be on the grid. Let's get a good generator and get a lot of the other essential skills down, and then think about, going off grid with electricity when you've got other things worked out and you're well established, because there's just only so much you can learn so fast. And that's what scares me for people. And I've seen people do that, and they wreck themselves because it's just too much to do all of it. And that off grid, of course, power obviously is what makes a lot of things doable for us. If you can churn your butter, I want people to know how to churn their butter by hand, but if you can churn it with a electric churn, you can do something else while that's happening. Same with making bread. Same with so many things, right? So I think it's a wonderful ideal, but man, you got to be cautious.
And a lot of these things are very romanticized, very clearly, right? People have this romanticized idea of homesteading, but just be realistic about it. It's a lot of work, right? It's great work. I love it to death. I cannot be happier sitting on my deck here and just watching green around me and the cows back there. I love that, right? But it is a lot of work, right? And things go wrong.
You can get an inline generator to run the essentials in your house. It runs on propane, and a propane tank with enough fuel to run for 6 months to a year, for way less than a full solar system. And so think those things.
You still need to get that delivered. So that is, you need the propane. Yep. There are areas here where you have a very hard time getting propane delivered because it's too far out, right? So all of these things you need to investigate prior.
Yeah.
And besides all of these things, one of the things I would really love to touch on, if that's okay, is whether you want to buy with friends and family. Because I hear that all the time. People are coming together with a group of whatever, friends, direct family, indirect family, etc., etc. The biggest stumbling block is finances in this case, because people have not talked about what they actually can and want to contribute to this. And they're not necessarily honest with each other or with themselves what they can actually really do. And what I usually see is a group of 3 or 4 people or 3 or 4 parties, and they want to do this together, buy a big piece of property, and everything beyond that is completely nebulous. They really do not have any concrete plan. And if it comes to financing, what happens very often is 1 or 2 parties are super active to find something and get it going, and the other ones are dragging their feet. And that's a big red flag already. So it is ultimately better for everybody's friendships, for everybody's family, to do it by yourself. And if you do it with somebody else, really have a very honest, upfront conversation, like a prenup. Really needs to be prenup.
Well, we're in a pretty individualistic society, and so I do think you bring out a good point. I mean, I'm excited personally to see more families coming together and working multi-generationally, and so I think there's a lot of value to that. But I think you bring out a good point in that oftentimes, if you haven't been living that way already, and living in that context, you're going to face a lot of challenges and a lot of interrelational challenges, from personalities to finances to resources to who does what, and to be very wise and smart about going into that, because it can be a huge asset, but it goes wrong a lot too.
Yes, and I'm not trying to talk this down. If it works, it's amazing, right? If you can do this with your parents, wonderful if it works, right?
Yeah.
But I just see too many people who they romanticize it. They don't have a clear vision of what this will ultimately be, who will do what kind of work, which kind of the heavy work will somebody do, and how is the value of that allocated. And people will talk about this at one point. I'm doing all this and you don't do anything. Right? And then they have disagreements, how to raise children, all kinds of stuff can come into place. And it usually is better if you keep things apart and do it by yourself, or have a property you can actually subdivide, where one has one half and the other one has the other half, and you can clearly keep things apart and still be neighbors and help each other.
Yeah. That's unfortunate to me that we're at that place, because we've just gotten so individualistic, our society. We've got to learn to give a little bit and work together, because
I'm with you. I'm 100% with you. But the realities are that people are the way they are, right? And we can wish all day long that it would be different, but it isn't.
Yeah.
And if I'm one thing, it's realistic, right? It's not pessimistic or optimistic. It's just the way it is, right?
Yeah.
And if I don't tell this to people, I said, think about this and have this tough talk. Sit down and talk about these things. I mean, same thing like getting married. Talk about the finances up front, because otherwise it will spread you.
Yeah.
Yeah. That all of these things need to be talked out and really put down in writing, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And
well, I hope so. And that's wise, even for people that are used to, working together. They're just probably doing it more naturally, but that's wise for any of us to really have appropriate understandings of what we're going in on together. Let's talk a little bit about other things to look for in a property, and particularly what I'm thinking about, we haven't touched on yet, is just the type of land versus the homesteading that people want to do. You get more grassland, you get more woods, you get flatter land, you get more hilly land. And because a lot of people have a vision of what they want to do on their homestead, they want to have a dairy cow, or, they want to have sheep, or this or that, and what do you need to be thinking about to make sure you're lining up your dreams with reality?
Define first and foremost what you really want to have. And that is not starting out with 5 goats, 6 sheep, a herd of cattle, and a lot of chickens. It needs to grow organically. So but you have to define what your ultimate goal is. So when we came here, what we wanted to have is pasture. And if we couldn't have bought it, we would have created it. And pasture was important because we wanted to have grazing animals. That was our idea. And we wanted to have an area where we can have a big orchard with a good exposure. So you want to have the exposure that the garden needs. It's one area. And so if you want to have pigs and you want them to forage, right? That's the word. Yeah, forage. Sorry. German, to forage and to be and to live in the woods, then having a hillside in the woods is great, right? The only thing you need is decent fencing. So that's the other thing. Well, how much fencing do you need? And fencing can be very laborious, very expensive, and sometimes very hard to put in. So having a property that already has fencing, great, really amazing. And then question of water, of course. Do you have a pond? Do you have access to city water? If the only thing you have is city water, chlorine, fluoride, all kinds of stuff in there. So you might have to change that. And then grazing, do you do rotational grazing?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Changes property dramatically. So if you know that, right? So when we bought our property, it was completely overgrown. It was all pasture, but it was all overgrown with goldenrod and ironweed and all kinds of stuff. And within 8 months after we bought the herd, it had completely changed. Yeah. I mean, completely changed. It was dramatic how much it changed. So these attributes are not necessarily a problem, because you can actively change them with the right animals. But there's really define what you actually want to have out of your homestead. And if If you want to have a dairy cow, you will need a different pasture than we need for our Dexters.
Yeah.
Dexters are great, by the way.
A lot of people love them. Yeah.
Oh, I love, yeah.
They're a good small holding animal from, I've
Yes.
never had them.
Yeah.
We have Herefords and Jerseys, but we've got different needs as well. And I know the Dexters work well for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Two more things I'd like to touch on. One is property's obviously gotten expensive. It's gotten expensive, I think, everywhere, but in the country, over the last several years, as more people are moving out to the country, which is great. I know some of us in the country complain sometimes of the people moving out, but we need that. We need. I think it's healthy, but it has gotten more expensive. How to strike the balance in finding a deal, finding what you want, what you need.
There's no deal.
Tips?
There's no deal. The deal thing is, I think, that has sailed in most areas. That's just a fact of life. If you want to have something that is good value, maybe define it that way. Deal is one thing, value is another. You very often have to create that value. And if you want to have value existing, you have to pay for it. Somebody else created it.
Mm-hmm.
But if you want to be in an area where it's very desirable to be in, you will have to pay the price, or you buy a subpar property and make it something.
Yeah.
And the Dohertys are a great example for that, right? Their property in Ohio, not suitable for agriculture.
Yep.
And now it's a thriving farm, but it's a long time of very hard work. So you either purchase something where somebody else has put a long time and very hard work in, and you pay for it, or you buy something and put that hard work into it yourself, and you pay less for it.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And that's the discussion I wanted to have. I mean, I use deal, but whatever words we want to put on it. But, property's expensive, looking for things where it has the core pieces in place that you need, but has opportunity for improvement. And, just as you were talking about your own pasture and seeing the difference in 8 months, you want the right infrastructure, you want the right access, you want, if you're buying a house, you want the house to be in the shape that it needs to be. And now maybe it's a fixer upper and you can take care of carpet and paint and, whatever your capabilities are, but the land also can be that way. You can find a deal where that land may not look that pretty to you at the moment because it's overgrown, but that's where you can find some value, where you can improve it yourself. And today there's so many resources out there to help speed people along. The Dohertys being one of them, who have done that for 30 years. They didn't have anybody to show them how, No,
but the Dohertys are special. So
well, they are, but there's a lot of, there's a lot of us out here sharing knowledge to where you can buy the right property that's maybe not as visually pleasing, but that you can bring up and make productive. And some of it's years and years. Some of it, though, with good management, like what you're talking about with rotational grazing, you can bring along, fairly quickly.
But that is also the reason why you need an agent who understands that.
Yeah.
So a very good example is a piece of property that was on the market here about 2 years ago, and it didn't look like much, but it had an old barn in the front that was perfectly usable, not pretty, but usable. Mm-hmm. It had a good shape, so not like 100 feet wide and 2,000 feet long, which is terrible, right? And so it had a good shape, it had good access, it had all kinds of attributes. It just didn't look like much because it was very overgrown, but it was overgrown with a lot of saplings, like crab trees, tiny trees. So really you wouldn't have to do much in order to clear that land. So that would have been value, in my opinion, but you have to see that. And if you don't understand that, if you just look at land and don't look at it online, because land looks the same online. I can make 5 photos here on my property and it looks exactly the same like property out in Morristown, because there's no, it's trees. Right? Yeah. And so that really doesn't help you. If you're looking online and you see something that is, it's 100 acres for $300,000, which would be cheap, right? Compared here in this area.
Just about anywhere that would be
there
cheap.
Will be a reason, right? It will be a ravine,
right?
Or it will have a meth house next door, which when you go further out, that's a problem. Right?
Yeah.
So that all of these things you really cannot know until you're actually here or somewhere where you want to buy. And for that, you need somebody who actually has feet on the ground. It's just boots on the ground. Right?
Very, very wise. And I think that's an important tip. Let's bring back the word deal. You see something like, whoa, that's an amazing deal. That low a cost of acreage. Yeah, there's a reason for that. It might be a reason you can deal with and work with. It might not, but you need to know that there's an issue. There's a reason for that. And of course, how long it's been on the market tells you something too.
That tells you a lot, yes. And it's really just know that there is no idiot out there who doesn't know what his property is worth.
Yeah.
It just isn't. Right. You have all these resources nowadays to find out what your property is worth compared to others. Nobody is in this for charity when they want to sell a house or property. Right. There's just a fact.
Yeah, and don't fault them for that. That's their property. They want to do the best they can on it.
Exactly.
One more subject here before we run out of time. And thinking about neighbors. Moving to the country is very different. People relate differently. There's different different rules, so to speak. And how do you go about having people think about their neighbors, the people that they will be interacting with or might not be interacting with very much, but they're there. People that are going to have opinions about them being there more than people might in suburbia. Let's talk about neighbors a bit and how to approach that reality, how to think about that and approach the reality of new neighbors in the country.
So if you're coming from a suburban area, don't be a snob. If you're moving out into the country, there might be people next door who have been here for generations. And that needs to be respected. Just a fact. Can be, there's neighbors in sense of your human neighbor, and then it can also be neighbors like a quarry or a fertilizer plant or something else that is in the direct vicinity that will heavily impact your life. And a lot of people just look at the property, but they never look what's outside.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes you just need Google Earth, just look what is behind that hill where you can't see behind, and there might be something you really don't want to be close to. For smell, for noise, for whatever else reasons.
Watershed, yeah.
Could be also things like, you remember when marijuana was a big deal for a while,
Still in places, yeah.
That ruined the life of a lot of people. It's just, if you have that all the way up your road and you have all that traffic and you have the appropriate interactions, that's just not very pleasant, besides the smell. So, and they need a lot of water. That's the other thing. You might have somebody next door who is putting something in that is a water hog. And if you have a well, you do not have water rights. You have a well and an access point, but you don't have a right to that water. So if somebody up the road is putting in something that is a big water hog, and that can be a vineyard, was for a while, a lot of people did that for tax write-offs, a vineyard, that marijuana farm, any kind of thing that needs a lot of water, that could severely impact how much water you have in your well afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
So really be aware of what might come and how things are zoned, maybe who is selling something that has 300 acres behind you and is 95 years old. Something will happen to that land. So think about that as well. And otherwise, neighbors, behave the way you expect other people to behave. That's what I think. We're trying to not let our dogs bark endlessly at night. And it might be of benefit to go to a property at different times of day, different times of the week, and listen, see what is actually coming up. It might be a completely quiet little road on a Monday morning at 9:00 because everybody's at work. But on the weekend, it might be a major hub to go somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
Or the other way around. So I would always go to a property at multiple times a day or multiple times a week. And then otherwise, neighbors can be a major issue. So try to be away as far as possible, and have really, and if your property allows you to have your house away, good fencing makes good neighbors. You can always establish a really nice relationship later on, but I would always put the stakes in the ground to have a little bit of buffer. Buffer is good.
Yeah, most people going to the country want some buffer. I recommend that people go get to know and try to meet potential neighbors beforehand and know, because you have to, not everybody can have a giant buffer, and you often have to share a road, whether it's an easement or a small country road. And it's nice to know, those people. Are they friendly? Are they not friendly? Do they want you there? Do they not want you there? It may or may not affect whether you buy or not, but knowing is going to help you know how to respond. You're going to learn some things, about them, their property. Do they have loud barking dogs? Do they have a company with machinery going? I mean, there's just so many things to know. And by going and meeting people, you can get a good idea of your community, because in the countryside, even when we're spread out, there's still community. Even if you don't see them but once a month, or even less rare, there's still community. And you want a good relationships. You want to know that those people are there for you. They want to know that you're there for them if needed, even if you don't see each other but once or twice a month or less. On the other hand, you may run into them on the road all the time. And, are they angry that you're there? That's a reality in some country areas, or are there road management issues? There's just a lot of things. And I think, part of being neighborly is going and getting to know those neighbors a little bit, knowing what you're stepping into, because you have to live with those neighbors.
And I 100% agree that you can see a lot up front. And when we were looking for property further east from here, there were some areas where there was a meth house next door. And of course, we did not want to be there for all kinds of reasons, right? But when we bought our property here, we actually talked to all the neighbors around and introduced ourselves prior to even purchasing to see how they are. Now, given that people can be very enthusiastic when you move in, and that might change. Right, that's the buffer, and while that doesn't necessarily have to change, you will see that, especially coming from another kind of lifestyle, their lifestyle might be very, very, very different from yours, and you need to understand that they were here first. Yeah. So it's not for them to adapt to you; it's the other way around.
Absolutely. And you're bringing in often a new lifestyle. Those people may be in the country, but they may not be homesteading the way you're thinking about and buying a homestead. And they may look pretty weird at you when you get going. And you got to remember, like you said, they were there first. You're the weird one. And that's okay. Don't be a know-it-all. Don't preach to them about how they need to take care of their land or raise more animals. Just be kind, and over time you can build good relationships. And
and that's
most
really
of the time it can go well, but sometimes there's challenges.
It usually does. It's rare that it really clashes. But that's also, it's an attitude. You bring your own attitude with you, and I think you need to adapt to wherever you go. And that's, of course, because we're immigrants, right? So we had to adapt to where we came to, and that's definitely a mindset, and I think it's important to have that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, very, very good discussion. And there's so many nuances to this. We could sit here all day and explore scenarios. And so hopefully this has been helpful to people. But you've got a book that will further this conversation and open up more thoughts, how to buy a homestead property. Where do people find your book?
On Amazon. It's
Amazon.
Just on Amazon. It's self-published, and you really have to type in the title, because they will give you all kinds of other suggestions. It's just what Amazon does. But I didn't put a lot of that. There's no professional editor behind this or so. This is really more like a family affair. My son's actually edited it, and so find it on Amazon and leave me a nice review. That would be great. But if somebody has other questions, there's an email address in the book. It's RE, like real estate for homesteaders, @gmail.com. And I'm very happily answering questions.
Great.
So
Great.
yeah, and that's not a charge thing, but I know that people have more ideas and more questions about these things, and I can answer them. I'm not a real estate attorney. I'm not a CPA, so there will be questions that I can't answer, legally can't answer. But otherwise, I'm more than happy to support anybody who wants to do this because it's a wonderful lifestyle.
Awesome. And it looks like you got a website, howtobuyahomesteadproperty.com as well, to learn more, connect with you. Is that?
Yes, but just use that email address. It's really the easiest because I check that, and that's the easiest. I can just quickly answer whatever somebody has in questions and give recommendations. I also have some people across the country who do this as well in my profession, who I might be able to send people to if they are wherever they are. Not always, but often.
Yeah. Wonderful. Well, thanks, Annette. Thanks for coming and sharing your knowledge and experience. And thanks everybody for hanging out. As always, get educated, learn about what you're going to do. Buying a property is obviously a very, very big step and a big moment, and we want to help you be successful the first time out as best as possible. So hope you will connect with Annette, and I'll see you guys soon. Goodbye.
Hey, Josh. Bye-bye.